I spent half my life feeling shame for being Asian in America. Hey race, what changed? Your daughter might have to be held back a year. I think she might be. My horrified Chinese immigrant parents gasped as my preschool teacher unprofessionally vocalized her concern that I wasn't singing my nursery rhymes as well as the rest of my peers. If I advance her to kindergarten, things will have to change at home. The following year, I began elementary school and started to learn English intensively as Mandarin took a backseat. I began memorize. There is a private hell that comes with being a first-generation kid. Growing up smacked not zu. Though, not za. While most of my classmates ended their days with sports or dance, I went home to repeat everything with my mother and teach her vocabulary that she didn't already know. I'd build more. In grade school, I would stockpile brown paper bags from crafting classes to hide the bright pink thank you bags in when my mom would pack my delicious, but fragrant homemade lunches. In addition to learning, some days when the pressure felt too immense, I'd keep my head down without uttering a word and count the hours until I was able to free myself of all speculation, bullying and conformity. And as soon as at night, after homework assignments and reconstructed lessons, my family and I gathered around the TV in crazed anticipation of our trashy Chinese soap operas that all seemed to feature some variation of a doe-eyed protagonist, caught in the center of an agonizing love triangle with two mediocre men. I'd then fall, but when friends came over, I manically expunged my room of all items indicative of culture like it was a crime scene. I pulled out I became queen of the double life. Slowly but surely, after years of engineering a convincing image, I found my own voice and finally felt like I had my footing to interject in conversations without social anxiety. The feeling of making. Over the years, I found snappy comebacks to the dreaded, "Where are you from? Where are you really from?" question. My mother's womb was, in my mind, this path of assimilation was what my parents had been pushing me toward ever since my education took a turn when I was 5. They never recognized. In college, speaking Mandarin became so rare that it was like pulling out a magic trick. If my friends and I happened to be dining somewhere, I could place orders or specify dietary restrictions in my native tongue. But even then, I grew to realize that no part of me fit either identity quite correctly though, and that's what's become the most difficult aspect of being first-generation American. Among my friends, the longing for relatability became most reflected in my love life, of all places. Whether coincident, though my parents made it a point for us to visit Taiwan as a family every couple of years, I lost connection with my cultural roots. Through the remainder of, then this past February, I intended to go back to Taiwan to visit my grandfather, but he died exactly 1 month before my arrival. When I finally I stared at the lifeless kitchen where my grandma once filled with her vibrant sayas. She would stand for hours on end intuitively selecting seasonings, stirring savory stews while gently handling decadent desserts and chopping vegetables with such swift precision. It was like watching a one-woman gourmet symphony in flow. Her flavorful meal. As I made my way into the living room and sat in my grandpa's cushioned armchair, I remembered him sipping tea and telling me his favorite stories about my mother in her younger years. In their old rooms, on my last day in Taiwan, we journeyed through lush forests of the rolling Yangming Mountains, carrying bundles of incense, flowers, and fruits to honor my grandparents. Mom, Dad, as much as I longed for my grandparents, their absence and this shared time with my parents was the deepest reminder that I came from a culture that was not to be forgotten. I still wonder what took me so long to return to Taiwan. Was there really no Instead of deflecting questions now, I take every opportunity to explain any component of my culture to anyone who takes an interest, but more importantly, I make the effort to ask my family about their past experiences and the way immigrating shaped their identity. In so many ways, this article originally appeared on
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.